Hi, good morning or good afternoon or good evening to everyone. My name is Andrew, and I've got my able colleagues with me, Sam, as well as also Jimmy, helping me out in this particular guided virtual tour. So first of all, a warm welcome to all of you. I myself is actually based out of Kuala Lumpur. So it is actually warm here, but also a little bit wet of late. There's been kind of raining quite a bit here as well in our city. And basically, thanks everyone for joining this particular virtual data center tour from Microsoft. We're going to spend probably the next, hopefully, 45, 50 minutes, okay, around this particular session. And hope that you guys would be kind of keep your interest on this. And if you have any questions, guys, please feel to pop it on the window, on the chat window, because Jimmy and Sam will be helping me out in terms of responding to these particular questions. So as I go through the slides, I hope you don't mind, I'll just turn off my camera for a while so as to be able to kind of make sure that the slides actually go on very well. And we'll come back on camera slightly later when I kind of finish the session to take any questions or answer any questions. So Sam, I think if you don't mind, maybe you can just go on to the next slide. Cool, let's start. Now, in terms of really our guided tour for the data center, I think it's really important that before we actually go on to the data center itself, we look at the global infrastructure of Microsoft. And as all data centers and regions, what we call data center regions are connected worldwide, it's really important to have a perspective of the entire landscape that Microsoft has got in terms of our cloud infrastructure. We have close to about 60 plus Azure regions in the world today. And this is one of the largest cloud service providers and largest infrastructure in the world that Microsoft actually set up. And this number is actually growing as we kind of go by the day, primarily because of the fact that as the world becomes more digitized, as the world gets to empower itself with AI, this type of infrastructure is really required. And in many parts of the world, we are either building or launching new data centers and new regions as we speak, as well as also upgrading many of them to have AI capabilities. Additionally, we have close to about 275 kilometers, 275 kilomiles of fiber. Sorry, I come from a metric world. The slide actually uses kind of the imperial system, right? So we are close to about 275,000 miles of fiber, making us one of the world's largest network providers. Again, this is a very important parameter to recognize, given the fact that interconnectivity between our data centers is really important. As we are a public cloud service provider, clearly many of the services that we offer are either global in nature or have infrastructure that could be located outside some data centers in order to provide the capabilities that are actually required. So case in point, AI infrastructure, right? As we begin to invest in more and more sites having these capabilities, we must be able to also connect those regions which does not have these AI capabilities. And therefore, this 275,000 miles of fiber is really, really required. This network then lands in countries, and we actually have close to 190 network POPs, and these are actually points of presence, right, that you see in the countries, located usually close to proximity of where the majority of the population is. And with this entire infrastructure, Microsoft actually provides cloud services, cloud and AI services, to empower the world and to empower all of us to actually do more. So in terms of the terminology, and that will be the next slide, right? I think it's good to actually take a look in terms of how we look into what we call either data centers or data center regions or AZs and geographies. So I think for a particular building itself or buildings, right, these are actually physical data centers, i.e. physical buildings that is used to actually house compute, storage, network within a particular infrastructure itself. And then we have things called regions, right? Where it is actually a set of data centers connected in a dedicated region by itself. And within this region, there are availability zones. Usually, there are 3 AZs to provide the type of SLAs that actually be required. And all of this can be located in a geography, i.e. a single country. So a single country can actually have more than one region, and within one region itself, there should be at least 3 availability zones. And you've heard this terminology of 3+0 or 3+1 quite a bit in the literature. And within each AZ or availability zone, there can be more than one data center. So you kind of build this web out and this infrastructure up. This can be a massive piece of investment where a lot of hardware, a lot of servers, a lot of storage, a lot of networking gear is actually in place within a particular geography. And it's through this setup that we are actually able to provide things like data residency, as well as also low latency that allows us to actually kind of provide the compute power that's necessary to address the digital needs of many nations today. If we go to the next slide, you will be able to see a typical kind of picture of how a data center region would look like. And the one that we are actually showing is actually a region called the US West, US West 2. And these are real, right? Obviously, this is a real picture. And you can see that there is a fair amount of buildings that are actually located within a region itself. And also at the same time, if you kind of look at the far right-hand top corner, you will also see electricity infrastructure as well. Now, data centers and data center regions actually consume a lot of electricity. And it's really important to have this electricity supply to be very reliable, as well as also to be close to the region itself. Obviously, this allows us to be able to get the needs that we actually require. At the same time, in terms of infrastructure built up, this is absolutely necessary. Don't forget, every region actually consists of 3 AZs, and each of these AZs are actually independently cooled, independently supplied in terms of power, as well as also having their own network capabilities with redundancy, as well as also having backup electricity as well. So there's a huge amount of investment in any one of this infrastructure that we actually put up in every geography that we actually build. The next slide shows you another one. Now, in this case, a little bit more brown than the previous one in terms of really the surrounding areas. Obviously, we locate many of our DC regions, not only near the vicinity of populated areas, and in many instances, in fact, outside in more remote areas. And this is really because of the fact that obviously land is very expensive, and at the same time, having to build always close to urban areas is not therefore always practical. The next slide is also another region that we have is actually called West Europe. This is actually located very close to Amsterdam. In fact, it's one of our largest data centers in Europe, and it has been, I think, been there quite a number of years already. I think in operation since the year 2010. So we continue to actually expand our data centers, continue to actually build our data centers. And the idea that actually we show you these pictures is that obviously these are massive infrastructure built up with a lot of electricity, a lot of power supply, and in this case, you could even see that they're located near wind turbines, which also forms reliable backup power in terms of reusable energy to actually power our data centers so as to be able to conform to the sustainability targets that Microsoft has got. The next one is actually an interesting one, a little bit closer to where I stay, and this is where we call the Southeast Asia data center, which is located in Singapore. Now, clearly, for those of you who are familiar with Singapore, you will know that Singapore is actually very kind of land scarce, right? So trying to build the massive spread out infra that you saw just now is just not possible in Singapore, or it becomes just too expensive. And so you can see that in Singapore, we actually built vertically up. This is also a way that we actually build our data centers in land in countries where it is very competitive in terms of trying to get land, as well as also power, okay, especially renewable power. And we do have the concepts and the layouts to actually build data centers from vertical upwards as well, so as to be able to meet the many requirements of local councils, as well as also national guidelines on how we actually place this. So all in all, we continue to expand. As you can see in the next slide, there are new infrastructure continuously coming up. Near where I stay, here in Malaysia as well, we are looking and we are actually potentially announcing readiness of some of the regions that we built. I think we just announced Taiwan, okay, about a couple of months ago, and we will continue to actually roll out new data centers and new announcements, new regions as we go along. So clearly, this is something that major investments from Microsoft, and this is will be on a continuous process. Now, coming back to sustainability, while we actually build data centers, you will see that, in fact, the next slide, that we continue to also ensure that we do have sustainability measures put in place as well. And this is something that is very close to our heart, that when we actually transform the infrastructure, that we are also at the same time making sure that we are actually reducing energy use as well as also carbon emissions. And if you go to the slide, Sam, on our targets, okay, you would be able to see that basically, the next one, please, Sam, if you don't mind. You will be able to see basically where we are going as a company in terms of sustainability. Now, we will look at this pillar individually because all of them are actually quite important, in fact, very important. The first one being carbon. We will be, by 2030, carbon negative as a company, and by 2050, remove all the historical carbons since our founding in 1975. Just FYI, Microsoft will turn 50 next year, which is just around the corner. And therefore, basically, by 2030, we would be carbon negative. And by 2050, we would then remove whatever carbon historically that we actually produce. So again, there's a lot of innovation in this particular area that we're actually doing. You have got a glimpse of it just now when you look at some of the wind turbines that are out there. We continue to invest heavily in new technologies like hydrogen cells. We're already having in many of our countries solar powered type of renewable energy, right? As well as also some of you might have read about our recent relationship with a partnership with Constellation, okay, in terms of nuclear energy. And clearly these are the sources of cleaner energy, more reusable, that we are looking into, so as to be able to help us achieve our carbon targets, okay, by 2030 and subsequently by 2050. Remembering that as we begin to build our infrastructure out in terms of our data centers, it is definitely true that more power will be required. And as AI becomes an integral part of our infrastructure, more and more power consumption would definitely be on the cards as well. So it's really important that we continue to innovate, we continue to do things in a way to allow us meet our targets. The other element that we always think about is water, right? So I think it's no secret that in any data center infrastructure, water is a very important element. And this is really by virtue of the fact that many of the data centers require cooling, either by the physical servers itself, or even in the building itself, right? Air conditioning is required, and these are massive infrastructure, massive buildings that we have got, as you could see actually just now from the picture slide. So water is actually a very important part of the data center, operations on a daily basis. But at the same time, we are very conscious by the fact that, hey, look, we just can't keep consuming water, right? We have to make sure that we have to protect the water supply. We have to actually put in more clean water than we actually take away. And by 2030, this again, our target to be water positive by then. Zero waste is also very important. And we'll talk a little bit about that after when we go into the virtual tour of the data center, because data centers and regions actually produce e-waste. Even though we have significantly reduced that by prolonging our cycles to be 6 years recycles instead of 4 years using AI technology, using very smart algorithms. But having said that, there's still inevitably some point in time that we have to take some of these servers and storage out. And therefore, we need to make sure that these are actually not going to actually just go into landfills ever and ever again, because landfills will also fill up. And therefore, we do have a zero waste policy by 2030 as well. And land is really important, right? Because here we have massive usage of land. Okay, we also are encroaching into some communities, and Microsoft as a company has also targeted to protect more land than we use by the year 2025, which is actually next year. I would encourage you guys to take a look into our sustainability report, because that's important, and you could find it in our website, and all the targets and the things that we actually do as a company over the multiple years that we have got in order to achieve these sustainability targets that's actually shown on the slide now. Now, the next slide will also show you a little bit around how we have looked into the journey of our data centers. We actually started quite a while ago. You could see one of the first generations that we have were really more towards the kind of the 1990s, 89s, that are around that area, that we were really looking into more the colo environment, okay, where we built to co-locate servers in our DCs. But through the various generations of data centers that we have got, we have actually progressed quite a bit, okay, in terms of how we actually approach the build of these data centers, as well as also look into the power utilization of what they call the power usage effectiveness, or the PUE, which is basically the ratio of the power consumed to provide compute over the total power that's being supplied to the data center itself. But as we begin to actually roll out our data centers, okay, in a very large way, you could see that actually we have actually from a hyperscale environment, well, actually from a modular environment back in the early 2010s, 2012, to now, to really this massive build and deploy type of architecture that you begin to see in the year 2020 onwards, and in the pictures that are actually being shown. So now, as we go towards the present type of the data centers, the design, as well as also the layout of this data center would be very aligned towards the 3+0 capabilities, the AZ type of infrastructure, okay, where we are laying them out in a very fast and building them in a very fast way, as well as also in a very sustainable way. There's a link at the bottom, which I kind of look at myself together with the customers, and this is what we call the Microsoft Emission Impact Dashboard. The good thing about this dashboard is that it can actually provide the environmental dashboard capabilities or environmental dashboard readings to help our customers do their own sustainability report, so that at any one time you can actually go to the dashboard to see the type of parameters that may be required, so as to be able to report them in your own now sustainability reports as well. And this is really important, right? Because I'm sure many of you are also generating your own sustainability reports, so as to be able to align towards your country and your national needs as well. So going to the next slide, I think it's really time to talk about reliability. And if we look at, again, the next slide, just click that on that, Sam, thank you. We are able to actually offer 99.99837 for a single instant virtual machine uptime. That is really based on a rolling 12 months average. and this is actually to May 2024. And this is just about 9 minutes of downtime per year, okay? And that's actually quite a significant parameter, because obviously all our customers are very focused around ensuring that their infrastructure do not actually go down. And this is the SLA that Microsoft actually commits, okay? And in many cases, we actually exceed this particular SLA that we actually publish. So a lot of infrastructure, a lot of software, a lot of people are actually working very hard to ensure that we keep to this particular SLA. But this is also a journey that we take together with our customers as well, because in a cloud environment, a reliable system is actually based on what we call a shared responsibility model. And the next slide will show you what we actually mean by a shared responsibility model, right? So while Microsoft is very obviously focused in terms of providing the infrastructure and the reliability of the cloud services that we actually provide, we also work very, very closely with our customer in terms of the architecture, as well as the options that the customer chooses on how they actually deploy their cloud service to achieve the type of SLAs that are actually being required by the customer. In a 3+0 architecture, okay, where you have 3AZ, you have things called zonal design, where customers will actually be able to actually choose operating within different zones, whether it's going to be a single zone or multi-zone environment, whether in fact it's going to be a single region or multi-region environment, to actually suit their SLA to what they actually require. And that's why we kind of say that this is actually a shared responsibility. This is something that we work together as a team, together with the partners, to ensure that the designs are in place, as well as also the processes are in place to achieve the types of SLA requirements that are required by the customer. And that's where I think it is nice to actually pivot into the next topic that we need to talk about, which is really around providing a trusted cloud. Now, today, obviously, the cloud is a place where there are huge amount of not only economic activity, but at the same time, also a lot of social activity as well, right? There's a lot of social exchanges that goes on. It's a place that people go to do a lot of work. At the same time, it's a place where people also go to do a lot of kind of a playtime, right? A lot of entertainment time as well is on the cloud as well. And therefore, if you look at kind of the way this environment needs to be looked into, it needs a very secure environment. And some of the statistics around what we are seeing is actually shown in the next slide in terms of security, right? So huge amounts of signals, trillions of signals are actually going into the cloud almost every day. And from a Microsoft perspective, we understand this because we not only operate an Azure infrastructure, we also operate a SaaS environment, i.e. with our M365, for example, with our business apps, we are also operating a very complete end-to-end cloud service environment. So we look at this very, very seriously, as today, bad actors are coming from a very wide spread of people, right? Of the society spectrum is very, very wide in terms of bad actors. They could be just an individual sitting down in a room trying to do maybe a hack out of fun, or trying just to do something naughty. It could be even syndicates who are really working very intensively to try to harness data so as to go onto the dark web. But whatever it is, okay, there are many bad actors out there. And Microsoft look at these things very seriously, primarily because of the fact that, as we just said in the very beginning of our presentation, that we are one of the largest cloud service providers in the world. So what do we do about it? So here we are actually investing significantly in terms of how we protect the cloud. We spend close to about 50 billion in terms of investments, in terms of research over 5 years, over a period of X number of years, to ensure that we have the right technology and we are always keeping ahead, one step forward of the bad actors. In addition, we ourselves employ a huge amount of professionals looking and researching and developing security measures, and that amounts close to about 10,000 more plus, okay, that are professionals looking into this whole security area. So if you look at this, right, from Microsoft standpoint, be assured that in fact there is a significant amount of investments for us to actually protect the data center as we go along. We have strong initiatives within the company, what we call the Secure Future Initiative, where there are 3 principles that we actually look into. Number 1 is what we call secure by design, which is really to ensure that security is the fundamental part of every design process that we do for all our products and our services. And this is important, right? So it doesn't become an afterthought. It is actually there by design itself, and this will be in our cloud as well. The other element is really what we call secure by default, which means that security protections are enforced from day one by default, and there's no extra effort required from the user. So when it comes as the product to you, as a service to you, it's already secured by default. You don't have to put any extra effort to wrap around things, to put extra software on top of it. By default, Microsoft has made it secure. And of course, as we continuously operate that environment, we continue to improve security controls as well as also monitoring to ensure that we address not only current threats, but also future threats. And that's why you hear about Microsoft using AI and lots of it, right, to ensure that we actually have the kind of the next generation of protection as the new threats appear on the horizon. So this is an important topic for us. This is something top of our mind, and surely something that from Microsoft perspective, we look into on not just a daily basis, but look at it from a priority, as a top priority on a daily basis. So next slide is really about privacy. We believe in one fundamental thing, that data in our data centers and our data center regions belong to our customers. It doesn't belong to anyone else, doesn't belong to Microsoft. It belongs to our customers. And therefore, this is really important. This is something that we protect. We ensure that we have principles around that, and we are prepared to actually go very far to ensure that data privacy is something that is always top of mind for us. Data residency, one fact, because there are many users today that actually requires data to be located in country. And that's also the reason why you can see that, when we are building data centers, in the beginning, we mentioned is 60 regions plus, which means that we continue to expand our data center regions footprint in countries and every country that require data residency. There's also data sovereignty, which basically means that they have to comply to local laws as well and stay there. And the third one is actually encryption. And encryption is really when data is at rest, data is in transit, as well as also when data is actually being in use. So we'll talk a little bit more later in terms of the actual silicon that we would use to actually do this kind of encryption and how we actually protect data. But definitely top of mind is something that this is something top of mind for us, right? So having said that now, in terms of the prelude, let's go straight into the data center where we actually see some of the physical infrastructure itself within the data center itself. So let's start the data center tour. Let's go into the lobby. All right, and just go into the lobby. So the lobby is actually an interesting place. You can just hold there, Sam, don't mind. Thank you. Just kind of reverse that, rewind that a little bit, Sam, if you don't mind. Yeah, okay, just be fair. So when you go into the lobby, obviously, you would see a few things, right? Now, the data center is obviously a very secure environment. Nobody just walks into a data center, right? If one qualifies to get into the data center, and usually that's usually the regulatory environment or regulatory bodies or people who are doing compliances to come and visit. Basically, they would be subjected to a high intensity of security. And the first place that they actually will meet actually will be, of course, the lobby, right? Where somebody would be there, reception will be there to actually check the identity of that individual, which already has been pre-confirmed prior coming to our data centers. On the right-hand side, you see two chambers. Actually, these are actually chambers that does a couple of things. First of all, they are metal detectors. And they're metal detectors because we don't want people to actually bring in things that they're not supposed to. There's a lot of kind of recording capabilities today, whether they are on small devices or they're large devices. And this is something that we do not want people to bring in. Why? Primarily because of two reasons. One, our customers, right? Our customers' data is inside, and we really do not want anything whatsoever to be of any threat whatsoever in the slightest form to our customer data. And of course, the other one, of course, is in terms of IP protection. There's something that we also are very, we hold to our hearts as well. So the first thing is really around the metal detection, and the other is the biometrics, right? So when somebody goes in, not only are they identified from a physical identification standpoint, but also from a biometric standpoint, things like fingerprint, for example, right? So that we can actually see that, hey, look, this is the right person coming in, which has been approved. And you can play the video a little bit, Sam. And as you go around, you also begin to see, obviously, some seats, a lobby for people to sit down, to be comfortable as you're going around. But also very prominent is actually cameras all around. All right, cameras all around to ensure that at every point in time, an individual is tracked and we know exactly where they are. In fact, if we go to the next slide, which is really around what we call the layered security approach. There are actually 7 physical layers that an individual needs to go through when they enter and when they leave the facility. And every one of these stages actually is well planned, well documented, and in many instances, in several countries, they're also audited. All right, because why? Data centers and data center regions are part of what they call critical national infrastructure. So there are agencies from the government that will come to audit, and many a times they will work with us, Microsoft, and also many a times we learn from this as well, and we exceed many of the standards that are being set by national agencies. So I won't go through every one of them in detail, but in gist, what you would be able to see is that from access to the perimeter itself, there is a lot of surveillance as well as also monitoring of every step that is put in to ensure that whether you come in as an individual or in a vehicle, everything is actually recorded and as well as verified. And once you get into the building itself, it doesn't mean that, hey, you are free to roam. No, you'll be given access to only certain rooms, okay? And even within that rooms, you will always be accompanied within the journey itself. And there will be also restriction in terms of floor, which floor you can go to and which floor auditors can't go to. And when one leaves the data center, there is also the same process that basically the individual or individuals will be checked for devices that we mentioned just now to ensure that nothing is taken out or nothing is also left behind. And then one leaves the facility. While this is very stringent and perhaps a little bit troublesome, quote unquote, it's absolutely necessary because of the fact that, hey, look, again, privacy is very important. Data privacy is very important. In a trusted environment is very important for us, and therefore this is actually put in place. Now, looking at that from a physical standpoint, let's go to the operations itself in the data center, right? This from the logical standpoint. And here it is also important to kind of look at it. Now, one would expect an operations room, like in most operations room, to be full of equipment, full of dashboards, and this one exactly likewise is so as well, right? But the other important thing about in the operations rooms is also people. right? Because we do have very talented as well as also people who are very skilled in making sure that any one time all our data centers are actually operational. And this is actually a room by itself, right? And there are so many processes, so many types of maintenance procedures, okay, that needs to be looked into at any one time. And kind of was quoted that, at any one time, there are close to about maybe more than 250,000 operational unique processes that are actually being required to ensure that our data centers are actually operating at peak top performance. And so we have operation groups, okay, to look into this, very dedicated set of people to ensure that all our data centers are actually working around the world in the performance level according to the SLAs that we have actually committed to our customers. So we do have really what we call a cloud collaboration center. Basically, the cloud collaboration center is a facility designed for collaboration, because, hey, look, when things are actually go wrong, and things will go wrong, okay, given the fact that we all kind of work in a technical area, I think inevitably we will have faults from time to time. But it's really important then that we do provide a facility for collaboration among the various skills, various engineers, various expertise that we have got, whether they're from cooling side of the house or from the Azure operation side of the house, or from any other element, okay, that may be required to maintain our data centers, that there is actually a centralized place that we use in Microsoft to ensure that our data centers are being operated at optimum and peak performance. And so we do have a collaboration center located back at Redmond. And if any of one of you who are actually having the opportunity to be in Redmond, do drop in. I think they also would accept customers in terms of executive engagements to really look into how we would work this from a variety of engineering team, okay, that would be stationed in this huge space, okay, close to about 8,000 square feet, located in our corporate campus today. So this is the collaboration center where we will be looking into the daily operations in a very minute way to ensure that our data center remains peak, or if there's anything that happens, there is an environment for engineers to come together to very, very quickly solve the problem as a team. Now, the other element that we talked about just now was really around security, right? And again, this is going to be very important, because if you can go into this, the Cyber Defense Center, Sam, if you don't mind, just flip the chart here. Thank you. And so the Cyber Defense Center is, again, the place that we actually look into in terms of having a centralized place for our experts to look into the security of our data center. While we operate them just now in the operational center for performance, we also have equally very impressive facility just to look also into cyber defense. So they're separated operations, but of course, working side by side with each other. And here, as we said just now, okay, we invest very heavily in this type of activity, close to 20 billion over a period of 5 years. And we also have 24/7 facility for really 10,000 plus of security professionals located not just at one place, but across all our development teams around the world to ensure that they are looking into this from a technical as well as also from a legal perspective. Because when there is actually a cyber event, on many occasions, there's also kind of triggering some laws, some rules, some compliances, as we said just now, because a lot of this involves local country laws as well. So you can see that the massive operation capability that Microsoft has got in terms of how we operate and secure our data center is not kind of an individual standalone kind of element. It's really an entire global operations that we have to look into every element of that And given the fact that we are present in more than 60 regions around the world, the massive task is actually very, very significant, and therefore requires us in Microsoft to be always top of our toes, top of our mind, and very focused in this particular area. So going into the DC, let's kind of take a look into the server room. Let's take a look into the server room. And I think I'm running out of time a bit. The server room, basically, as we go in, as you can see from here, really consists of two aisles. Essentially, one aisle is what we call the hot aisle. The other aisle is actually what we call the colder aisle. The thing about the new types of data center servers, rooms are actually very different from the past. I think some of you may have visited older data centers where it gets very chilly because you have underground kind of underground cooling, right, in order to keep the servers, but not in the new types of the data center servers that we actually build. Even in the hot aisle itself, right, and here you see, I think the hot aisle, because it's behind the cold aisle, the temperatures are usually between the 30s to the 40s, maybe to the high 30s to the 40s. And on the cold aisle is now in the range of between 20 to the high 20s, okay? And this is really because of the fact that due to the environmental kind of sustainability targets that we hope to achieve, we are really trying to operate at an environment which doesn't require intense cooling, okay? But coming back to the data center, you will see just kind of servers, racks and racks of that. You see overhead cables on the top, and that's really around the networking. Going a little bit deeper, you will see the network switch on the left hand, the right hand side. I think, Sam, if you go just a little bit deeper down the aisle, you should be able to see those networks. And yes, if you just stop there, on the right hand side and the left hand side, that's where the switching hubs are, right? That's where many of the cables on the top would actually land down onto these servers, on the switches itself to power the switching within the data center. If we go on to the next slide, Sam, just a little bit dwell onto the type of chipsets that we actually use, okay? As Microsoft innovate and Microsoft brings and Microsoft learns, we are also having our own chipsets working together with our partners like NVIDIA, like Intel, like AMD. But here you see the Azure Cobalt 100. This basically is a chip that we use as we learn from the many workloads that we run. And this is actually the chipset that we actually use to actually optimize stacks and also energy so as to be able to get maximum performance and efficiency. And so as we progress, we bring about this Azure Cobalt chipset, actually a cloud-native environment designed on ARM. Okay, it is 64 bits with 128 cores. Okay, so a chipset that is basically has been announced about a couple of years ago, and now in general availability in all our data centers and operating VMs as we go along. The other one that we are looking into is, of course, the Maya, which is actually really used for training LLMs. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, because it's not just about the Maya chipset that we look into, right? It's really about the whole ecosystem around Maya and how we actually build an ecosystem around this very energy, as well as also very high performance type of chip to deliver the LLM and the AI learning capabilities that is really required. But I think suffice at this point to say that this is also something that we have announced just about, I think, last year at Ignite in 2023, and it's really the first custom in-house AI accelerator chip that Microsoft has developed. Now, the other thing that we talk about really is around the networks, right? You see, hey, look, while we are looking into, of course, compute capabilities, network capabilities are very, very important. Remember one of the parameters that we showed, we have about 275 kilomiles, okay, 1,000 miles, okay, of networking cables around the world. But it's not just about the networks, right? It's also about what's inside the data center, so as to be able to accelerate the network that we have got. And so we have things like this chip's called the Azure Boost, which basically focuses around the types of innovation that allows Microsoft to achieve the fastest remote and local performance in markets today. And even in the remote storage performance, we are looking around 12.5 gigabits per second throughput, okay, and close to about 650K of IOPS. So this is kind of a type of innovation that we try to bring to accelerate the networks that we have got to operate our data center from a global perspective. And then as the world becomes more data intensive, you see the next slide showing you what we call the boost chip, DPU, which are actually the data processing units. Again, it's an in-house chip that we have specifically architect to actually take on more data-centric type of workloads. One of the paradigm shifts of AI is really around data, right? The data fabric. And as the data becomes very intense, very, very hard, these are things that it's going to be very important for us. So here you have very specific chipsets looking just on the data processing element of the entire process. The next one that we really should be very interested in is what we call the Azure integrated hardware module. And looking at kind of the requirements for security and encryption is increasingly important that we have dedicated hardware security modules, okay, that allows us to provide this kind of hardened services for encryption as well as also keys within the boundaries of a single silicon chip. And that is really one of the core things, because it is where through this type of technology that we are able to actually provide the protection that's being required in terms of data protection as well as security. And these are actually generous purpose chips that we actually built so as to allow us exactly to do the things that we talk about, which is really how do we make sure that our infrastructure is protected against increasingly complex kind of bad actors out there. So coming back to the Azure Maya chip, okay, now this is really important development for us in the world of the AI, but our progress in this particular space is not just about bringing the Maya chip. It's about the entire rack system that is actually looking into the Maya chip. And if you look into the next slide, you would see that how we've actually designed the end-to-end rack for AI, where the power requirements for this type of infrastructure is very high, very different from the past, and requires a lot more cooling. And therefore, when we actually design this chip, you see that together with this, we also have our next generation of cooling racks beside this. And this is what we call sidekick racks. You hear some of this kind of language in the literature. Essentially, it's kind of similar to a radiator in your car, right? It's a heat exchanger, which basically takes heat off the main processing unit into a side appliance, which is then cooled by liquid, okay? And the liquid is then recycled, and heat is then taken away from the actual processing units itself. So you can actually see this, I think it was in display for those of you who may have the opportunity to go to Ignite recently this year. And certainly it's also appearing in the literature. So feel free to go into the Microsoft website to take a look into this, as well as some of the accompanying literature in our other blog that we have actually written around this. But this is obviously going to be very important as our new generation of AI infrastructure filters into our data center regions around the world because of the environmental targets that we actually need to achieve. Next slide shows a little bit into the future. Okay, I'll talk very quickly around that. The first one is really around on the left-hand side, what we call Project Silica. It's actually quite interesting when I kind of look into this. It's actually I think the video will also show you how a laser beam is actually running across kind of silica plates, right? So as to be able to provide and write storage, okay, in a much wider capacity, deeper capacity, and they're really looking around 7+ terabytes right now in a square plate as we go forward into how we increase storage capacity. And I think 7 terabytes is probably within a space of something which is not larger than a DVD device. Okay, so huge amount of progress in this particular area. Next one that they're looking into, that we are looking in our research lab, is actually the DNA storage project. This is actually synthetic DNA, not human DNA, of course, right? And it's again through this type of technology that we're able to store data to boost longer term durability, okay, and of course higher density than even Project Silica itself. The last one on the right-hand side is something that is really interesting. I found it to be fascinating when I kind of learned about this and it was announced. And it's really the use of low carbon building construction material. As we all know, data centers require a lot of concrete, but the manufacture of concrete actually requires a lot of carbon type of emissions. And that's not good, because as we continue to scale our data centers, we just cannot keep on using this same technology, because it will be very difficult for us in our decarbonization journey for our data centers. And so here we have announced recently as a pilot the use of prefabricated wood, okay, which are fire resistant material treated first to ensure that obviously we do not want the data centers to be burning down. To be mixed with some element of steel and a lower element of concrete to provide the building blocks for our data centers. And it's interesting to read that, in fact, with this type of technology, we are able to reduce close to about 35% of carbon output as compared to just using the traditional carbon. So things like technology of this nature, innovation of this nature, okay, provides us some avenue and some ability to actually move towards our sustainability targets, okay, as well as also providing new methods in terms of how we scale and how we actually build out data centers. So very quickly, if we go to the next slide, Sam, and this is a kind of a tour around the outside part of our data centers, where you will see a huge amount of turbines to allow us to actually kind of power our data centers, especially when the grid, for some reason, goes down, and we are using turbines to do this. Of course, some of these are generators, which means that basically they also might kind of use diesel, and in many cases they do, but we continue to experiment with biodiesel, for example, to reduce the footprint. We also continue to experiment using hydrocells, for example, and in this case you could see that we are also experimenting the use of wind in order to provide the backup capacity and capabilities to our data centers in a more sustainable manner. And if we kind of look at how we cool our data centers, okay, in the next slide, different parts of the world requires different types of technology in terms of actually cooling, okay. Adiabatic cooling, I think, has been used quite a bit, but they are not very suitable perhaps in tropic countries where it's very, very humid, and therefore other elements like wall-to-wall cooling is probably a little bit more suitable. And in many of the tropical data centers, in fact, as we say, the cold aisle are actually running quite quote-unquote warm, because they will probably be working in kind of the high 20s, and the data centers are actually able to perform at peak performance level with those kind of levels as well. So yeah, depending on where you are, in the colder countries, we have also instances where cooling is obviously the air is very, very cold outside. We use the outside air to cool our data centers, and when those air get warmed up because of our servers in the warm aisles, then they are actually channeled back into the community to help the community warm their homes, etc. So there are many ways of doing this, and obviously from Microsoft perspective, we are exploring different technology, different methods, as well as also to ensure that we provide the right type of operating procedures so as to be able to keep the environment protected as well. So as we go kind of towards the end of our data center tour, you could see the network room in the next slide. Again, very important. Networks are really core to us, right? And the fact that we are operating on a 3+0 configurations where there are 3 AZs, the latency between the AZs are actually important. The round trip is not have a boundary of about 2 milliseconds round trip, because as we begin to explore many of the low latency type of applications, especially in applications like telco, where many of the switching networks for 5G, in fact, are very software driven, are very cloud driven, and many of the new telco kind of BSS or business support systems are also cloud native today. The latency tolerance is actually very low, and therefore you can see that we have actually boundaried them to less than 2 milliseconds between the availability zones so as to provide the SLA that's being required. So network is very important. We talk about the massive network that we have got, and it's really through these rooms that we have in the data center that connects these networks that we have got globally into the last point, to the data centers, to the regions, and to ultimately our customer premises as well. So huge amount of technology around here, but very, very important. Very quickly, I'd like to kind of show you also what we call our circular setters. Remember, just now I did mention that today we have actually prolonged our cycles of our equipment from 4 to 6 years, but still we would like to recycle those equipment that has been taken out. But before we do that, obviously we make sure that we are cleaning them of customer data. And in fact, in part of the circular center, if you can kind of, stop there, you will kind of see that the element on the blue side, that device on the blue side that you had a glimpse of just now, is really the shredding machine, where all data bearing equipment is actually shredded to ensure that they are not in any way exposing our customer data. But here you see people working to recycle parts which are safe to be recycled so that they can be reused in the community, and therefore does not just go onto the landfill, okay, which obviously is quite damaging to the environment. So the next slide really is just to reflect the fact that, hey, look, we've shown you some of the pictures of infrastructure that we have built. We have also gone into the data centers itself to take a deeper dive, right down to the individual even chipsets that we have got within there. These are very huge and very complex projects, and clearly, it's the long-term viability that we need to actually ensure that we are providing reliability of the cloud services that we provide to the customers. We actually owe it to our customers, but at the same time, we are part of the community, right? We are part of the community, not only locally, but also globally. And therefore, we need to ensure that we are also positively contributing back to the communities that we are in, our data centers are in, as well as also globally in terms of supporting especially the sustainability targets that we have set ourselves to be. So I'll just kind of end there. And if there are any questions, feel free to continue to put it on the chat. But thank you so much for your time